This is very much akin to paying your taxes so that the bridge you never use works. Because if they had to close that bridge, those people would go elsewhere and maybe it would be on a road that you use. And it's really just not an attitude that you can have about your taxes, for example. It doesn't benefit me. But it does. It benefits you indirectly by those people being able to go about their lives in a regular, normal, predictable, and appropriate, reasonable fashion. You get the same thing. You get the right to use that bridge, and you get the right to drive on the roads, and you get the right to not have those people's traffic be backed up on your road because the bridge is over there and you're over here. So it's not like that where we should only pay for things that directly benefit us. You need to look at the overall. Yeah, so this is another interesting, slippery slope question. Michigan Supreme Court has issued this order to advise that the court is considering whether questions regarding mental health should be included on the personal affidavit that is part of the application to the Michigan bar examination, and if so, what form those questions should take. Before a final decision, et cetera, the court welcomes all views, etc. The issue. Pursuant to Michigan law, a person is qualified for admission to the bar of this state, so that's attorney licensing, who proves to the satisfaction of the Board of Law Examiners that he or she is a person of good moral character, 18 years or older, required general education, learning in the law, fitness and ability to enable him to practice law in the courts of record of the state, and that he or she intends in good faith to practice or teach law in the state. In addition to the passage of the examination, an applicant must be recommended for admission on the basis of the applicant's background, which process is conducted by the State Bar of Michigan through its character and fitness investigation procedure. As part of the application process, an applicant must submit an affidavit that provides information about the applicant's life, including question 54A. Have you ever been treated or counseled for, or refused treatment or counseling for, a mental, emotional, nervous condition which permanently, presently, or chronically impairs or distorts your judgment, behavior, capacity to recognize reality, or ability to cope with ordinary demands of life? If yes, provide the names and addresses of all involved agencies, institutions, physicians, or psychologists, or other healthcare providers, and describe the underlying circumstances or the diagnosis, treatment, or hospitalization. Further, another question asks 54B, have you ever had or been treated or counseled for or refused treatment for counseling for mental, emotional, nervous condition that permanently, presently, chronically impairs your ability to exercise such responsibilities as being candid, truthful, handling funds, meeting deadlines, or otherwise representing the interests of others? In addition, the Board of Law Examiners recently added clarifying language to the preamble. A person is qualified for admission if he proves to the satisfaction of the Board of Law Examiners that they are good moral character, 18 years of age, good education, learning in law, fitness, an ability to enable him to practice law, and that they must assess whether an applicant manifests any mental health or substance abuse issue which impairs or could impair an applicant's ability to meet the essential eligibility requirements to practice law. The board does not seek medical records as part of this initial application. If it is later determined that medical records are required, they will subsequently be requested. The board supports applicants seeking mental health and or substance abuse treatment and views effective treatment by a licensed professional as enhancing an applicant's ability to meet the essential eligibility requirements. In answering the questions below, you do not need to provide information that is reasonably characterized as situational counseling. Examples of situational counseling include stress counseling, grief counseling, and domestic relations counseling. I'll stop there for now. What do we think of that so far? If you want to be a lawyer in Michigan, you may have to answer questions about your entire mental health history, every doctor that you ever went to, every diagnosis that you may have received, treatment, etc., etc. If you're unless your counseling situation is described as situational. Now I've been counseled. And I'm not afraid to talk about it because counseling is a fine thing. And going to see a mental health professional should be something that's routine, that we do normally, like we would go see a primary care physician for a physical health checkup. Because it's stupid. If you're having mental health issues, how do you know? Like, yeah, you can figure out that you're having some kind of issue sometimes, But not all conditions manifest that easily or quickly. Not all people are good at admitting that something is wrong with themselves. Heck, I remember when I was diagnosed with ADD, which turned out to possibly be a misdiagnosis many years later, but I'm forgetting that for a moment because I didn't know that yet. But the day that I was diagnosed, I still remember feeling so disappointed in myself. I remember feeling so small and so useless and so inadequate because something was wrong with me. So it's important here that we understand the context on which these things happen. The Board of Law Examiners is asking you to take those things that happened, those negative experiences that you've tried to take and turn positive, and reveal them all to the board so that you can be judged. Now, the standard in this country is usually innocent until proven guilty, and that should apply to applicants as lawyers as well. And if there isn't a law enforcement interaction, your medical information is private. So I expect a kind of vigorous debate on this against the revelation of basic mental health things. I could understand if a person has had a diagnosed disability and needs, say, accommodation on the bar exam or something, needs to take more time on the bar exam because they have some kind of mental health issue. But I don't see how you just get to outright ask for everybody's medical history.
It seems very strange to me because we're told that we have privilege with our doctors and that these are secrets, legally protected secrets. And now, and we also say we want people to seek counseling.
Yeah.
And then they turn around and say, oh, by the way, give us a waiver so that we can get access to your medical records. And as one of the judges pointed out in this document, this could discourage people from seeking help in the first place because, well, if I don't have it documented, there's no documents for me to disclose. Now, is there? So the whole thing is very strange to me because we would want people to maximize, to the extent that they need to, their treatment for mental health. And if we turn around and say, oh, because of this, we're now going to more carefully scrutinize your application, then if you're a rational actor, you would be discouraged from seeking help. So the whole thing is counterproductive.
Yeah.
In terms when people are like, okay, well, is it a situational thing? I know people who have gone through law school and it is extremely stressful. I watched people have basically no life for 3 years. It was just always reading and writing. And yes, the stress got to them after time. And yes, they needed some counseling. They needed someone to listen to them and to help give them tools to be able to cope with this extremely stressful thing. And it's very competitive and you're always afraid of failure. And
yeah,
I'm like, okay, well, does going to law school count as a situational thing? Because you could get diagnosed with anxiety. You could be given anxiety meds. And it's because you're in law school.
Yeah, I needed anti-anxiety meds when I was in law school, and that was before I had a whole family thing in law school. I had a fiance, and she left while I was in law school, and it really affected me because that was sort of my only support system. And I was right in the middle of finishing law school and taking the bar exam, and that really deeply affected me. And so, yeah, that definitely caused me to seek mental health treatment and all that. So this so concerned people at the Department of Justice that after receiving a complaint from a bar applicant in Louisiana, they advised the National Conference of Bar Examiners to conduct a preliminary investigation, and the NCBE revised its standard questions related to mental health. Now it says, within the past 5 years, have you exhibited any conduct or behavior that could call into question your ability to practice law in a competent, ethical, or professional manner? Do you currently have any condition, including but not limited to substance abuse, mental, emotional, nervous conditions that would affect your ability to practice law in a competent, ethical manner? And if yes, are the limitations caused by your condition reduced or ameliorated because you receive ongoing treatment, etc.? So those are closer to appropriate questions that seem to sound an awful lot like the Americans with Disabilities Act. But those questions were more, the perspective was from, is there a manifest condition that would cause your incompetence? Because the standard for a lawyer, literally rule 1.1, the first rule in the book, is that we have a duty of competence. And a lawyer needs to be able to assess competence. Is there a law job out there that would be overwhelming for a person with a disability? Yeah, absolutely. I can think of if you can think of a disability, I can probably think of a law job that would be impossible for that person to do. But there's also many law jobs, and there's many intensities of law jobs. You don't have to take a law job that requires you to handle 54 cases in 15 minutes, like a public defender. If a person has a mental or emotional health condition that they wouldn't be able to go rapid fire in a courtroom in a public defender 54 cases in 15 minutes kind of situation way, is that limiting for that person? Yeah, probably. But that isn't the question we're asking when a person is applying for the bar and taking the bar examination. That's a question for a person who has passed the bar, gotten their license, and then has a duty to not take more cases than they can handle. Now, the flip side of the public defender situation that I just gave is that we also think that it's some kind of violation to make any attorney and subject any defendant to a situation where there's several defendants and no time for the public defender to evaluate their cases, and then they have to go on and be an appearance in public court for 54 cases in 15 minutes, which is only a slight exaggeration. That's also horrible, but that's forgetting that for the moment, and that should be subject to a complaint from somebody. I'm not in that situation, so I can't do that. But someone who's in that situation wants to be a public defender, can't do it because they don't afford enough time. Yeah, that should be a complaint, and somebody like the DOJ or other ethics board should be investigating that stuff. So then there's this concurring opinion that I think Kurt mentioned. Judge Bernstein. I strongly support this court's invitation for public comment on this issue. Whether questions inquiring into an applicant's mental health should be included on the application for the bar examination is a significant question that not only affects law school graduates aspiring to enter the legal profession, but also one that asks us to fundamentally examine the consideration and accommodations our state is providing to those with disabilities. I hope that public comment will, at a minimum, address and clarify the following questions. How, if at all, is inquiring into the state of an applicant's mental health an effective or appropriate way of assessing an applicant's good moral character? How, if at all, is inquiring into an applicant's mental health status an effective way of assessing an applicant's fitness and ability to practice law? To provide greater context for this question, the investigation into the Louisiana bar application, the United States Department of Justice cited substantial research indicating that a history of mental health diagnosis or treatment does not provide an accurate basis for predicting future professional misconduct. Research has failed to establish that a history of previous psychiatric treatment can be correlated with an individual's capacity to function effectively in the workplace, and there is no empirical evidence demonstrating that lawyers who have had psychiatric treatment have a greater incidence of subsequent disciplinary action by the bar or by any other regulatory body in comparison with those who have not had such treatment. In our consideration of the issue, evidence that bears on the connection or lack thereof between a person's mental health status or his ability to practice law would be invaluable. What standards or guidelines are used in evaluating an applicant's initial answers to the mental health questions on the bar application regarding or regulating any subsequent investigation into an applicant's mental health history, and in determining whether an applicant's mental health history should preclude his or her acceptance? Does asking mental health questions actually deter prospective applicants, such as law students, from seeking rehabilitative counseling and treatment or detract from the effectiveness of such professional help? And I would say yes. we had a speaker come into our professional responsibility course, and I think again in another ethics course or something, we had a speaker come in who talked about their drug abuse and suicide attempt. And it was very candid, and I really appreciated how candid this lawyer was in talking about how life does not end when you've had a mental health condition, provided you're not successful at suicide. And that's another reason to catch these things quickly and early. And a good 1/3 of the class were comfortable. 1/3 of the class was comfortable in saying that they would never seek mental health treatment because of the way it is perceived in certain circles, because of the stigma that they would either never get a job, or they would lose certain friends, or they would not have certain prospects for a desired future job. That some of that stuff is really pretty limiting. And so, yes, I could see someone being spooked out of getting a mental health evaluation because they've not received enough information reassuring them that authorities are going to use that information only where it's appropriate. And let me go further. In my own mental health interactions with professionals, many times the professional refuses to take certain notes or refuses to create certain things, as a diagnosis, because they don't want to create a situation where, well, now there's some kind of record for the future that needs to be maintained and all that. Because of this exact thing, people will use this against you. And so it's not a good idea to keep certain records if you don't know how it's going to be used. Let's see, the judge goes on has some other questions. What purpose is served by asking mental health questions that is not already served by asking other questions? Multiple states have entirely eliminated mental health questions, including Pennsylvania. What effect has eliminating those questions had on those states? Does answering affirmatively to the mental health questions impose any additional burdens on the applicant or cause delays in processing an application? This just has it does seem to me to have the burden, or carry the potential burden of discouraging people from seeking mental health treatment in the first place, because if they never seek it, then they never have to consider lying about it on a bar examination. I would hazard a guess that including a mental health question on a bar examination application only increases the amount of lying on bar exam applications, something that you're actually trying not to do. You're trying not to encourage people to lie on things. So maybe ask questions that are legal instead of questions that are, frankly, not relevant to it. What do you think should be the standard for competency in the practice of law? Should you have to disclose your mental health issues to the Board of Law Examiners, or should you only have to swear that you are capable of maintaining your duty of competency and other duties in the practice of law?
Send everybody to therapy so that everybody can learn how to handle and process stress in positive ways that will stop them from becoming burnt out, and to help prevent depression and substance abuse and stuff like that. Yep. And then everybody just gets to check, yes, I've had therapy. I believe it will make me a better lawyer.
Yeah. Could you imagine the inverse? Ask the question, has there ever been a time in your life when you skipped your annual mental health evaluation? Could you imagine a world that we live in where it's somewhat mandatory to go to your annual health checkup? I'm not necessarily advocating for it. I'm just think about it. Just like feel it for a moment.
That sounds like a good world.
Yeah, actually, doesn't it? I personally believe that it should not be stigmatized, and that it should be healthy for a person to go to their mental health counselor for a checkup.
I think Tactical was alluding to an interesting idea. What if, like, in addition to our continuing legal education requirements, there was some requirement that every lawyer had to have so many hours of time with a therapist every year as part of, and then it would be destigmatized because everyone's doing it.
Yeah, I wouldn't actually mind that. And here's why I personally don't feel terribly offended by that. one, I think it could be done very reasonably. Even a 1 or 2 hour checkup, even a 1 hour checkup, I think would be enough for me to feel comfortable. Even if a person didn't want to go and do such a thing, a 1 hour checkup can be done. So you make it part of their 12 continuing education hours or something. Either add 1 hour or subtract 1 hour and add this one in. And make it that they have to go to see a psychologist. Let's just say that they have to see a psychologist. If they already see one, there's no additional requirement. They can just have one of those hours signed off as or something. And if they don't, so let me tell you what happens if you've never seen a psychologist. First of all, I'm being a little bit disingenuous here. There is no way that a true psychologist would be able to fully evaluate you in 1 hour. However, there could be like a basic checkup. If you were going to, if you were trying to receive treatment for a medical issue, you would need several visits before the psychologist should be recommending treatments. In between, they'll recommend temporary treatments. Try this for this next week or whatever like that. But in general, you're not going to walk out after 1 hour and have a list of diagnoses. Yes, you are PTSD and narcissistic and dyslexic, and that's not how it works. In fact, to get to many of those diagnoses requires further testing. Many of these tests are soft tests, answering a bunch of questions on a multiple choice kind of thing, and then they evaluate how out of alignment your answers are with their baseline. So the mental health, if I'm talking about a 1 hour mental health checkup, it's more like we just want to see that you're not an absolutely visibly insane person. Like if you walk into the thing and you are just banging your fists and shaking your fists and you're angry at everybody and you're ready to destroy everything, Jason Lee Van Dyke, maybe you need further mental health evaluation, and that's when somebody's duty to warn or something, or they won't sign off on the form or something. And there obviously has to be a lot more written to how we handle that procedure. Maybe you walk in and you're just absolutely terrified, and there's obviously some kind of nervous something going on. Well, the evaluation could lead to, yes, I'll sign off on the section of the form that says, I recommend further evaluation, and the consequence of that is simply that you have to attend further evaluation. Now, obviously, there's some problems here, because what if the psychologist just wants further evaluation so they get paid more? So we don't want to set up incentives for the opioid crisis in that sense, a slippery slope like that. But you get where I'm going. There could be just a simple thing where everybody has to have a checkbox, and maybe that is a special psychologist. Maybe it's someone who's approved by the Board of Law Examiners to do the continuing legal evaluation or something, like the continuing mental health evaluation. I don't know. There are things though, and the reason why I think this is okay and not a huge violation of everybody's rights is because there is something about the law profession and certain other professions that are considered extremely stressful, and we have double the rate of suicide, double the rate of alcoholism, double the rate of substance abuse, basically double the rate of mental health problems as the average population. Now, the average population mental health rate is pretty high. It's actually in the teens to 20%. And so to say that it's double is about 40% of attorneys potentially have some either mental health or substance abuse problem or other. Suicide is a common thought to have when you're that stressed out. So these are common problems, and honestly, telling people to self-regulate under a duty of competency doesn't seem to be working so well now, does it, if your rate is double the average of the rest of the population? So maybe something needs to be done. I'm not saying no to it. I'm saying maybe that's not the way to do it, is to evaluate, guilty until proven innocent, but rather to treat it much more delicately, like a physical health issue. You wouldn't say you can't practice law because you have a physical disability.
I think the idea of having those checkups, another promising aspect to that would be that if you get into a situation where you find yourself over your head and, you know, sometimes when it rains, it pours and you have a really bad couple months and life happens, you would already have a connection with someone that you've seen a few times, that is familiar with you. Maybe you've become more comfortable with them, and it makes it easier to turn around and say, you know what, actually, I think I need an appointment now.
Yep.
I mean, also one thing my first university did, and this was just optional, was run by the Student Association and the Health and Wellbeing team. They run monthly sessions where people could just come, and will be in group session, where they would just talk about how to look after your mental health, what kind of, how do you call it, I can't get the word now, exercises you could do for just being mindfully aware, what to do with stress, and just take some self-care, self-help things you could apply to yourself, especially when exams periods were coming, which I think should probably be more a mandatory thing, especially for university students, because it can be very, very stressful to do so. The other thing that just comes to mind, like for example, my first years, which I have my tutor class, they will have their first proper exam at the end of the year, just to see how they are tracking. It's not very too serious, but they will for the first time need to really study hard. And I also have to teach them like PSHE, which is physical sexual health education, and we have to do and deliver sessions like how to cope with stress and how to look after yourself mentally as well. So if that can be done even at a high school level up here and optional at university level, I see that's something that could just be incorporated for people to know how to help themselves, and then hopefully also open the doors to be able to seek more help if they feel they're getting snowed under.
Yeah, mental health should be something that's incorporated into our culture and less stigmatized overall. And it's also something that costs a lot of money. Going to see a mental health professional is $50 an hour, $100 an hour, $150 an hour, sometimes even more, depending upon the qualifications of the person. And it's often not covered by insurance. So again, this is something that if we just provided this to everyone, we could count on a little bit better behavior, a little bit more responsibility. I don't mean we can tie them together and say that, oh, well, if you get mental health counseling, you should be held to a higher. No, I mean, if we do it for everybody, then everyone reaps the benefits of all of us being available to work at our best ability and exist at our best ability. And I'll give you a really stupid quick example. This is not a mental health, not a mental health example. I'm going to give you the example of my Ilsa, who actually, I think they might have gone back outside. I'm sorry. But you guys remember that Ilsa hurt her leg a year ago. And at first we thought she just sprained her leg. Well, right away, she wasn't as happy as of a dog. Right away, she was, obviously her leg was bothering her. And then by the time we got the leg figured out that it was a permanent thing that needed to be fixed by surgery instead of just treated by some medication and some downtime, you could tell that the dog's attitude had changed. She was not as bright, not as happy, not as funny and fun and having a hopeful outlook on life. And she was more so like, okay, well, I'll just lay around today because I know I can't do anything, and Dad won't let me do anything anyway because, my leg hurts. And even though I know that their brain maybe doesn't connect all those dots in that way, her attitude changed. And then at some point along the way, she hurt her other leg. I don't even know when that happened. I have an idea or two of when she finally injured it. But so then after she healed from the first surgery, she had to have second surgery. And the same thing, like you could see that she got even more depressed and even more down and more upset because she had to go through the second surgery, and now she has to recover from second surgery, except, and I don't know if you guys have seen this in the videos, but since she's come out of that second surgery, and I'm going to get emotional here, that brightness has come back. She's starting to be a happy dog again, and she likes to run around more, and she's just in general a happier dog with a brighter outlook. You can see it in her face, and you can see it in her attitude and how she chases the ball and everything. What do you think happens to humans when they've got a physical or mental health problem and they can't get it fixed, or it takes a long time to get it fixed, or they don't have the support system to get it fixed? Yeah. And now when you think about how many of us Americans can have even one problem, you might realize that pretty much everybody has something. Everybody has some kind of issue. It could be anything at all. But because we don't go around demanding from each other that we disclose our medical problems so that we can all decide how much judgment and deference each person deserves, we need to have kind of a standard of space that we give people to have their problems. This is a big violation of that. That's why I'm upset about it. You give people the space to have those problems and correct them, and most people, I'm going to guess 75% or more of people will take care of those problems in the correct way, or in at least a close to correct way.
Sometimes I think it would be a lot easier for me to go through life if other people went to counseling.
Yes.
Not just me go.
Yes, this is very much akin to paying your taxes so that the bridge you never use works. Because if they had to close that bridge, those people would go elsewhere, and maybe it would be on a road that you use. And it's really just not an attitude that you can have about your taxes, for example. It doesn't benefit me. But it does. It benefits you indirectly by those people being able to go about their lives in a regular, normal, predictable, and appropriate, reasonable fashion. You get the same thing. You get the right to use that bridge, and you get the right to drive on the roads, and you get the right to not have those people's traffic be backed up on your road because the bridge is over there and you're over here. So it's not like that where we should only pay for things that directly benefit us. You need to look at the overall. And if we gave mental health protections to reasonable mental health protections, I don't mean protections from people with mental health, but to people with mental health issues, basically every one of us, the world would be a better place for us all. And I'm not convinced that it would cost extra. I think overall it would cost less to provide a minimum standard for people. I'm getting dangerously close to universal health care and universal income, but those are two things that I think are worth exploring because of the economic prospects of it. I personally think that providing some kind of universal safety net in the form of healthcare, income, whatever, prevents people from needing to commit crimes or getting angry at society for neglecting them or feeling marginalized or cast out and having a terrible attitude towards people and others that they live with and such. That's my personal opinion. It is not the message of lawful masses, but it is definitely a message that can be considered. All right, so that's our show. Thank you very much for joining me. I am Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney, here as usual to discuss the law with my lawful masses. We still use patreon.com/ljfrench as our primary method of financial support. The numbers came in from last year, and Patreon has a very clear win in the revenue stream. YouTube wasn't even close to the amount of money that Patreon generated. So congratulations, Patreon supporters. You've beaten YouTube, and we're making these videos for you. Now, I've been making videos for my Patreon supporters for the past year plus, as opposed to making videos trying to accomplish YouTube views. And the point is because Patreon supporters are the main audience. They're the ones who are supporting the thing and want to see the thing the most. And so we prioritize our content for the supporters. So the supporters have a channel on my Discord, as well as access, of course, to the Patreon private stuff, which we don't release too much patron-only stuff. If you guys want to see more of that, let me know. We'll try to come up with something. It's not like I can show you my day-to-day because a lot of what I do is confidential with clients and things, but we can try to come up with some things. So for the month of January, our Patreon supporters are as follows. At the $50 level, thank you to Jonathon Doe, John Steele, Gavin Barnard, Eevi, Andy, Kyle Mudrak, Verement, Tayne, Michael Pearce, Terry Crisp, Richard Fournier, Spirit Bear, Jan Negrey, Daniel Perez, and Sean McNamara. And the $5 plus supporters, there are about 200 of you, are scrolling on the LED panel behind me and on the crawl of the video when Brandon edits them down. So thank you very much for joining me. Do I prefer Twitch subs or Patreon? I think Patreon takes less money. I think Twitch takes a higher percentage. What I haven't figured out is how to put Twitch subs into the Patreon. Like, I mean, obviously I can figure out how to do it. We haven't set up the system to do it yet. So if the Twitch supporters want to be in the list of sponsors, let me know. We'll figure out a way to make that work. And I'm assuming we're going to have a sponsus.org support page here at some point as well. And so all of that will have to get integrated. So there will be other support options as well, from Sponsus, from either PayPal or Twitch, and of course through Patreon. And YouTube, conspicuously, has not turned on our paid subscriptions feature on YouTube, even though it's only supposed to be a 30,000 subscriber threshold, and we're at 100. So I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, so thank you all for joining me. I'm Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney, and I will see you in the videos that drop. Love you all.